Welcome to Keiko Vision, a podcast to pump you up to change the world. Hosted by me, Jordana. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Keiko Vision with Jordana. I'm Jordana, and I'll be your host. Over the last couple of weeks, there have been two horrific mass shootings. One at a grocery store in upstate New York, and at an elementary school in Texas. I feel like this needs to be talked about because common sense gun regulation is something the vast majority of Americans agree on. But we have this one large organization that is preventing the will of a nation, and that's the NRA. In the U.S., we're 25 times more likely to die of gun violence than any other developed nation. The NRA makes it sound like the right to bear arms in any way was just baked into our Constitution, and that is what our founders wanted. But in reality, the first 300 years of our country's existence, there were thousands of gun laws on the books. There were laws saying who could and couldn't own a gun. There were registration laws for guns and also for gunpowder. There was concealment laws. The norm was strict regulation. But that changed. The NRA was originally founded to protect Americans against European forces. And for over a century, the NRA focused on competitions and training and improving aim. The assassinations in the 1960s, they were against people who represented progress. And that is when the NRA shifted. I was in high school on April 20th, 1999, the day of the Columbine mass shooting. That day was already planned as a day of silence by the Gay Straight Student Alliance. I remember reflecting a lot. And anybody that knows me knows it's very hard for me to be quiet. And it was really hard for me to make sense of what happened in Columbine. The deadliest school shooting in U.S. history took place on April 16th, 2007. And that was at Virginia Tech, when a gunman killed 32 people before killing himself. The school shooting in Texas against elementary school students makes me sick. My brother's family is hosting an Afghan refugee whose school was bombed because it taught girls. She lost her best friend and many of her other friends. And my son met her for the first time yesterday. And Cooper has a heart of gold and brought up the bombing. And he told her not to worry, that we don't bomb schools in America. And that girls can get an education here too. That's actually not true. There have been school bombings in the U.S., with a school bombing in Bath Township, Michigan, being the deadliest school massacre. That was in 1927. So there have been a few more, but it's a very rare event. What is not rare is school shootings in America. Over 300,000 kids have dealt with their school being shot up, have experienced that firsthand. And if you look at the charts, just like all of the other charts, the number is just increasing in recent decades. So I guess there's a twofold here. One is the power of the NRA. And this lobbying organization has really hijacked our democracy. But then when you put this all together and when we create a society that fills so many with desperation awful things will continue to happen. When we cater to billionaires, when we cater to special interests, we do so at the expense of everyone else. And life continues to get harder and harder, and more people end up in this pit of despair. And it's the despair that's reducing our lifespan. But for some, that desperation is fueled by anger. And for these people, taking their own life is not enough. They want to cause pain to a society that forgot about them. I took part in a active shooter training when I worked in a corporate job, and the idea that I have to teach my children what they should do if anybody comes into their school with a gun leaves me nauseous. There are things that your kids should know. I'm going to take a quick break, but I'll tell you about that later in the program.
Keiko, the social app. K-A-K-O. Keiko, the social app. K-A-K-O. Keiko, the social app. Keiko rules. Keiko, the social app. Billionaire greed? Keiko, the social app. Destroying America. Keiko, the social app. T-minus 7 years and counting. Keiko, the social app.
And with that, let's get back to the show. So before the break, I was talking about mass shootings in the United States and the NRA and its influence. What's surprising is that the NRA didn't always used to be like this. So the first major gun regulation was the National Firearms Act, and that was in response really to gangsters during Prohibition and Tommy gun style wars and shoot-ups. The NRA supported the law, and actually the president said, "I have never believed in the general practice of carrying weapons. I think it should be sharply restricted and only under licenses." So that was in 1934 with the National Firearms Act. The NRA also supported the Federal Firearms Act, and that just made it illegal to sell to people who were convicted of crimes of violence and fugitives. Like, again, common sense. And so the NRA supported it. In 1967, when California banned open carry in response to Black Panthers patrolling the streets, the NRA supported it. But then something changed, and guns were used to silence leaders of progress. And that's when the NRA began switching to defending the Second Amendment as opposed to protection and training. And so in 1968, after the assassination of 3 national leaders, President John F. Kennedy in 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Senator Robert Kennedy in 1968. So that started a whole bunch of riots. And in response, the Gun Control Act was pushing for a national gun registry and licenses for all gun carriers. So the NRA blocked the National Gun Registry and licenses for all gun carriers in 1968. And then really became a lobbying organization for the Second Amendment. At the time that the NRA blocked the Gun Control Act, President Lyndon Johnson said the voices that blocked these safeguards were not the voices of an aroused nation. They are the voices of a powerful lobby, a gun lobby. And he was absolutely correct. And then so during this time, this is the time that that a lot of really wealthy men were starting to come together and using their money purposefully. And then in 1986, after years of lobbying by the NRA, Congress rolled back the 1968 restrictions on buying, selling, and transporting firearms across state lines and limited inspections of gun dealers to once a year. I'm going to put up online some links to the materials that I'm talking about, but the amount that our senators receive from the NRA is sickening. Millions of dollars. Remember, these senators are trying to get $10,000 a day in campaign contributions. So if you get a big chunk from the NRA, your job just got a whole lot easier. So, like I said, I participated in an active shooter training for my work. And there are a couple things that I learned that unfortunately I feel the need to pass on. And I'm going to put resources on this as well. But one of the first things to do is prepare when you're not in an emergency. So, what are you going to do? Do you have an exit plan? What if you're in this place versus that place? An example for a school, what if you're in homeroom as opposed to the cafeteria? So try to identify different exits and areas within those common places. And also identify objects that are around. You want to get yourself at least a door, a barrier away from the shooter if you can't exit. So for me, that would be going into my boss's office, would close the door, push up as much stuff against the door, and then grab a stapler off his desk or grab one of his pictures that are hanging on his wall that we could use if the gunman breached that barrier. So unfortunate, but it's important to have a plan. Then if you are in an active shooter situation, first, if you can run, run. The shooter is likely to be in a state of tunnel vision. So try to stay on the peripherals. If you can't get away, get a door in between you, a solid barrier, cover and hide. Grab something that you can use to defend yourself, though. And if you could find a place where if the shooter does open the door, you'll be to their side. You're not going to be the first thing that they see. And you could hopefully use that weapon before they turn and see you. All the resources online say that fighting is the last resort. But if you do fight, be aggressive, commit to your actions, try to get others to attack with you, and be okay with whatever damage, even lethal, occurs as the result. So basically, be prepared to seriously injure or kill the other person, because at that point, it's you versus them. I disagree with this. I think if you are in a good position and you have something that could slow the person down or stop them in their tracks, you should use it and then help the wounded. All the resources online say to survive during, run, hide, and fight in that order. And I'm going to put a link to this online. It has good information, not just on active shooting situations, but just all different types of disasters and emergencies that you could face. I have to say something about mental health because a lot of times this is where the focus ends up. And it's no secret that mental health in the United States, the resources are lacking. It's completely inadequate. And we absolutely need to work on this. But we also need to address the root cause of the problem. Why are so many young men just beginning their adult life doing this? We have to address the underlying erosion of stability. Life has become so difficult that instead of trying to live in this world, people are taking their lives and they're taking their anger out. And their anger is misplaced. It's not on Black people, immigrants, Jews, or any other minority, except for the super obnoxiously wealthy individuals and corporations that are using their financial strength to funnel all of the financial gains of progress to the top. I'm going to close out this episode. The sad thing is, by the time you listen to this, there will most likely be another shooting. So on that sad note, I'm going to sign off. See you next Tuesday.
Keiko, the social app. K-A-K-O. Keiko, the social app. K-A-K-O. Keiko, the social app. Keiko rules. Keiko, the social app. Billionaire greed? Keiko, the social app. Destroying America. Keiko, the social app. T-minus 7 years and counting. Keiko, the social app.